In this tutorial, I will show you how to read a CSV file with pyspark and how different options are working. Create a new Jupyter Lab and import Jupyter Lab and import Spark session and types. Also import NumPy and datetime. Define the table structure. My CV file has the following columns: name, age, current _ sold, bank _ name, Boolean _ value, ingest _ date and random _ timestamp. Set the correct column type. In order to load the CSV, you can the CSV method. When you load the CSV file, you can specify what schema to be used using the schema method. The first parameter, the CSV method, it takes a string, or list of strings, for input path, or RDD of strings storing CSV rows. I will get the path for this CSV file. Here I will add the other parameters. But first, let's display the data frame and the data frame schema. As you can see, the CSV has the schema we defined. The only difference is that the null parameter is always set to true. As you already know, a CSV file has a separator for each value. The default value here is a comma. If I change this value to a semicolon, then all will be in a single column because these columns are separated by a comma, not by a column. So let's change the separator. The default separator is the comma, so let's change it to a semicolon. The columns that are separated by the semicolon are displayed properly. In order to change the encoding, you can use the encoding parameter. Quote parameter sets a single character used for escaping quoted values where the separator can be part of the value. If you would like to turn off quotations, you need to set not null but an empty string. If you don't escape the quote inside the quotes, then the quotes will be part of the word, and it won't be escaped. Escape sets a single character used for escaping quotes inside an already quoted value. Comment sets a single character used for skipping lines beginning with this character. By default, it is disabled. Header, when is set to true, it takes the first row and put it as column names. So let's add some column names. As you can see, the new column names are showing up. If you set the header to false, then the headers will be automatically generated starting with _C0. But if you are using a schema, the header will be overwritten by the schema. Infer schema infers the input schema automatically from data. Because it requires one extra pass over the data, it should be avoided. As you can see, when you set infer schema to false, all columns are string. If you set this to true, the types are automatically detected. Enforce schema, if it is set to true, the specified or inferred schema will be forcibly applied to data source files, and headers in CSV files will be ignored. If the option is set to false, the schema will be validated against all headers in CSV files in the case when the header option is set to true. Field names in the schema and column names in CSV headers are checked by their positions, taking into account pyspark.sql.case sensitive. Though the default value is true, it is recommended to disable the enforce schema option to avoid incorrect results. Again, null parameter does not work. Ignore leading white space and ignore trailing white space do not work, as you can see. Null value sets the string representation of a null value. Here we can specify what names we assign to nulls in our CSV. The same thing happens for not a number. Positive infinity. Here you can specify what string you use for the positive infinity string in CSV file. Negative infinity. Here you can specify what string you use for the negative infinity string in CSV file. Max columns. Define the maximum near of columns the CSV should have. If the CSV has more columns than this limit, then an error will be thrown. Max chars per column. Defines the maximum number of characters allowed for any given value being read. By default, it is -1, meaning unlimited length. Again, if you don't respect this limit, an error will be thrown. Sampling ratio. When you infer the schema, a part of the CSV is scanned so that it detects the column type. This near impacts how many rows are scanned so that the column types are detected. If you set this number to low, then no scanning will be made. Multi-line, parse one record, which may span multiple lines per file. Empty value. Sets the string representation of an empty value. Nan and null values are not affected. Line separator defines the line separator that should be used for parsing the CSV file. The maximum length is 1 character. Mode allows a mode for dealing with corrupt records during parsing. It supports the case-insensitive modes. Note that Spark tries to parse only required columns in CSV under column pruning. Therefore, corrupt records can be different based on the required set of fields. This behavior can be controlled by spark.sql.csv.parser.column-pruning.enabled by default. Permissive, when it meets a corrupted record, puts the malformed string into a field configured by column name of corrupt record, and sets malformed fields to null. To keep corrupt records, a user can set a string type field named column name of corrupt record in a user-defined schema. If a schema does not have the field, it drops corrupt records during parsing. A record with more tokens than schema is not a corrupted record to CSV. When it meets a record having fewer tokens than the length of the schema, sets null to extra fields. When the record has more tokens than the length of the schema, it drops extra tokens. Fail fast throws an exception when it meets corrupted records.